Y is recorded in front of a live studio audience.
This particular show is focused. We started this show, really, it's called Why, and it's basically we met at an event and started talking about, why do people have the passions they have or pick the careers they have and choose paths that maybe are a little bit less traveled, like becoming an actor or becoming a spiritual guide or becoming a professional mermaid or becoming
Rodeo clown.
a rodeo clown. Or I mean, we've talked to
I get it.
hundreds of people.
Not that we conflate spirit guide and rodeo clown in the same,
yeah,
just to make that clear. Yeah.
two both very cool roles though. And what we found from our conversations with people was that almost everybody had a really, really amazing story that anyone with a soul could relate to. And two, that we're not all as different as the world sometimes tries to pretend we are. So in speaking to some people that, we tell this story all the time. One of the first people we interviewed was the world's greatest streaker. And he was amazing. And we asked him, why did you do this? Like, why would you do this? And he's like, well, the world's a really stressed out place. People are upset all the time. If I can go into a stadium full of thousands of people and take my clothes off and have everybody start laughing for no other reason, why wouldn't I do that? I'm like, it's a pretty good way to live life. Why wouldn't you do that?
Everybody finds their own niche.
Right?
There are people who never do find their niche, and those
Right.
forever sad, because what's that old line? It's like, the old saying they tell you when you're a kid is like, find something you love to do and you'll never work a day in your life.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You can make a living doing, and honestly, that's the problem for actors.
Right.
Actors are all trying to do what they want to do, but because there's such a demand from people wanting to be actors that the market is flooded with people. And that's why traditionally actors have always been, before there were unions, actors were always abused by managers, producers, and all of that, because they had no protections and they could be easily replaced.
It's so true. And I mean, that's the thing. And my uncle would tell you this from a very small child. That's what I wanted to. Well, I wanted to be a Dallas Cowboy cheerleader, but if that wasn't going to work, then I wanted to be an actress.
So did I.
I mean, right? See, you got closer to it than I did, but I still think it's going to happen.
Good enough to make the cut until way after I was over the age limit.
Right.
This is Why, with your hosts, Heidi Hedquist and Luke Poling.
Well, and I can't decide if it was because I really did want the job, but I also wanted to go on the Love Boat. And I thought I'd get to do both.
But when you're young, you go through so many things that you think you might want to do.
Yes.
I mean, when I entered college, I had no idea what I wanted to be. None whatsoever. So I took like classes in psychology and sociology and art and history and all of these different things that were about the mind and people, because it was 1970, right? 1971. And it was all about Carlos Castaneda and Herman Hesse and, psychedelic drugs and all of that shit. And then somehow I found myself going into, somebody took me to see a play. And I'm sitting there watching these people on stage and I'm thinking, fun. I could do that. I could do that. And so then the next semester, I enrolled in a basic theater class, and I walked in, and my tastes were a little different back then, but at that time, it was very appealing that I walked in and found that out of a classroom of 35 students, there were 4 of us who were not born with vaginas, and 2 of those were gay men who were not interesting to me. So there was this room full of women that I was interested in.
Right.
And I thought, I like it here. I think I'll stick around. It turned out that people cast me and I had some kind of aptitude for it. And there's a reason for that. I'll get back to it though. But then the next thing I knew, I was doing plays and I was getting degrees, and all of a sudden it's like I'm in my mid-20s and I got a master's degree and all this experience and union cards as an actor, and I guess I'm an actor.
Yeah, it's
But
official.
I started acting long before I knew that this was a career. When
Mm.
I've known who I am since
Yeah.
I was like 4 or 5 years old.
Is
Only
it?
I couldn't tell anybody, right? Because
Yeah.
where we lived, I grew up in Australia in a tough working class neighborhood. And Australia today, it's one of the most progressive liberal countries you can imagine. But this was a long time ago. And in those days, it was a very 50s style homophobic, patriarchic bullshit
Yeah.
country. And the least sign of weakness would get the shit beat out of me. And I got down there and I was in school. And after a couple of weeks, I said, fuck this. And I don't want to get beat up anymore, you know?
Yeah.
And I
Hmm.
started watching the boys on the playground, and I divided them into 3 categories in my head. I'm like 6, 7 years old. I'm thinking, those are the bullies. I don't want anything to do with them. And those are the victims. I don't want to be one of them.
Yeah.
There's this group in the middle. There are these guys who don't get beat up, but don't find it necessary to beat up anybody. And so I started studying them, literally.
It's
6, 7 years
amazing.
old. I was studying like how they walked, how they talked, how they smiled, how they laughed, the things that they said, how they stood, how, just all kinds of things. And I could still remember doing it. And so I created a character for myself that wouldn't get beat up. And
Oh,
I got into college, and that's why when I looked on stage and I saw people pretending to be somebody else that they weren't, I thought, well, yeah, fucking hey, yeah, I can do
Yeah.
that.
yeah. I've been doing this for
Yeah.
I can
years.
do that. I've been doing that for like years of my life. I've been doing this. And then the funny thing was that later on, when I transitioned, I I did one play after that, because, and it wasn't that I was looking for it, but it turned out to be good. There was a role for a transgender woman in a play, and the director really wanted a transgender woman to play it. And she found me and she was like overjoyed because it's like, I'm a professional. And most
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
are very definitely amateurs at best. And we did that. And it was a nice coda for me, because it was a role where the transgender woman had a lot of issues that were peripheral, if not shared by me. But after that, it was like the reason that all of those years of acting training came in handy to me now. When you are an actor, they teach you all kinds of things in a professional training program like I went through. They isolate, they break down everything. So they break down your physical movement, and from there you end up with period movement and dance and ballet and modern dance and fencing and all of these things that have to do with your ability to control your physicality. And it's all broken down into technical little things, little units, like, oh, in the 18th century, the gentlemen sat in a certain way and they perched on those little chairs because their pants were so tight that if they slouched, their pants would rip, right? Little
Yeah.
things. And certain thing, when the women wore the big hoop skirts and stuff, it affected the way they moved. Everything did. So all of those things are things that we're trained in, and breaking them down, little things, isolating movements. Voice the same way. And also, most important, because you're studying people, characters, and all you have are the words on the page, what other people say about them and what they say. That's all you have. And you have to figure out who that person is for the start, and then how their brain works and how they think about things, and why it is that at that particular moment, the only thing they can do is to say those words, that line, that they have to say that, because that's all of the thinking that's led up to that has gotten them to that point where the words on the script just come out of your mouth because they have to. Well, all of those skills, when I transitioned, allowed me to start analyzing the way that I move, the way that I walk, the way that I laugh, the way that I talk, the way that I sat, the way that I crossed my legs, all of these things. And it was because of that acting training that I was able to isolate each one of those things. So when I would sit there and I go, okay, I just crossed my legs. Why did I do that way?
Mhm.
Because when I was 8, I watched a boy named Terry cross his legs and he looked very masculine. And I thought, all right, that's got to be part of my character. And
Mhm.
so I stopped doing that. And it's the same thing with all kinds of other things, like how you sit, how you gesture, how you smile, all different kinds of things. And then one by one, stopping doing those things. And so what was left was, for the first time in my life, not acting. It was just me, organic. And
Mhm.
That's amazing.
it was a big adventure, but it was a benefit to that training. Right now, I don't ever want to act again because I like being me.
I love it. I
Mhm.
love it. And I have not been on a journey like you've been through to get to your authentic self, but I've been on a mini journey of just figuring out sort of my own who I am and what I do. And sort of I have sort of not dual personalities, but sort of dual ways I approach things, like, and so listening to you and knowing what my own little mini journey has been, that complete journey, that's just amazing.
Everybody is on a journey. That's why what you're doing is interesting. There's a group around, and they come around to transgender women. They arrive in a city and they interview as many as they can to get their stories, and they put them into an archive. And there's another thing on NPR where they do a same kind of thing, where they
Mhm.
invite people to tell their story, and then they
Mhm.
go through them and they broadcast bits and pieces of some of them, or some of
Yeah.
them. But it's like, somebody at one time, a producer, told me, and it's like, I was asking about how you pick projects and stuff, and they said, well, it all depends on the story. And I said, well, I got a story, and she said, yeah, you do. Everybody's got a story. That's the thing.
Oh.
What makes some stories more memorable is how you learn to tell them.
Right.
If you
That's true.
tell your story well, almost anybody's story can be fascinating.
It's so true.
Yeah.
And we have certainly found that in our conversations. I mean, it's just, and the things you'd least expect. You
Which is
just,
the most interesting people you've talked to?
oh my gosh, we've so many.
Ah.
Let's see, there have been so many. Um,
Are you guys in the same house right now?
no,
Nope.
nope, we're in two different states.
Where are
Yeah.
Um,
you?
I'm here. I'm actually in Pontiac right now, but I live over in Commerce,
Okay.
and Luke's outside
And
of
then I'm
Philly.
outside of Philly. So we basically met once in person, and then Heidi emailed me saying, like, so do we want to do this podcast? And so, having met in person once, we just started talking via Zoom and started recording and figuring out what that rapport was between us, and then adding that third person into the mix to just sort of see what that's like. And it's all about having these conversations that it's more conversational. It's not hopefully is not a rundown of the same questions, the where do you get your ideas from? But it's just about, like you said, getting everyone's story, and everyone's story is different.
Stop you for a second. I want to stop you for a second.
Mhm.
Canadian?
I get that a lot. I am not. I grew
Where
up in Boston.
did you grow up?
I grew up in Boston. My parents are both not from there. So I think I have some weird amalgam of accents.
It's just, remember what I told you about breaking down things?
Mhm.
Studied IPA and all of the different 26 different vowels and diphthongs and all of that shit, and accents and dialects. And every now and then you use something with well, I can't remember the IPA name for it, but it's commonly, it's the vowel that's in the second half of about.
Okay.
Like a boot.
The boot.
When you say that vowel sound, it sounds Canadian.
Huh. I really like poutine. I don't know if that.
That's probably why.
Yeah.
That's it. You eat enough
That's-
poutine, you become
Figured it out.
Exactly. Yeah. But it's interesting. I was wondering, you said at 6 you started to kind of do this almost acting exercise to kind of
yeah.
cover your true identity.
wasn't like I really knew what I was doing.
That's what I was wondering. If you had this idea of like, what do I do
went
to not
back
get
and
beat
I
up?
made a conscious decision in my head where I'm sitting there going, I don't want to get beat up. Okay, I'll act like these guys. No, that never happened.
Hmm.
Or a matter of just instinctive behavior on my part, I started to act like the ones who were not getting beat up because I wanted to gravitate towards them. So I started to make myself like them. It wasn't a conscious decision, but it was very definitely a decision. And I can look back and I can see it happening in me, you know, that
That's fascinating. Because well, I wonder, when were you able to kind of verbalize it and say like, you know, who I am on the exterior is not who I am on the interior? When were you able to say to yourself, if nobody else, this is not the true representation of what I see when I look in the mirror?
was the fear of being that fear of being who I am
Hmm.
at that time and for most of my life was a very real and scary fear, which
Certainly, yeah.
kept me from accepting who I was, and instead, like a lot of us of a certain age, because it's different now. And that's what's so wonderful about the world today is we've got all these young people who are finally confident and able to find a supportive environment in which to be themselves while they're still young. And don't get me started. The whole thing about transgender care for kids, the right wing has it totally backwards. They think that supplying that care is abuse, withholding that care is abuse. Because
Yeah.
so many, I'm fortunate, I always had a slender frame and I don't know how to say feminine, but relatively feminine features in my face. Some of us inside exactly the same. Once they go through puberty, this sweet, pretty little person turns into a fucking linebacker. The genes kick in, all of a sudden they're over 6 feet, they got broad shoulders, they got deep voices and heavy 5 o'clock shadow. If they're blocked in the puberty blockers, and that's not allowed to happen until after they turn 18, at which point they can begin taking the correct hormones so that they're getting female hormones in them and it's overriding the testosterone and getting rid of the testosterone. They don't go through that. And so their transition into, and this is stage one of the way I'd like to see the world go.
Hmm.
Stage one is changing it so that kids can transition naturally into the gender that they should be in a shape and form that is palatable to cisgender binary standards of what men and women are supposed to be, so that they don't look out of place. God, I was standing in a Starbucks one time and I was in line and they had a TV set on. Something about Caitlyn Jenner came on, right? And there was a girl behind the counter and she was serving these two women in front of me. And you'll know what I mean when I say Bloomfield Karens.
Oh, God, yeah. I know them well.
They were a pair of like
Oh,
mid to late 30s Bloomfield Karens. You know, they'd had their token 2 kids. They'd married their doctor. They had lived in this rich house. Like all they could do during the day was fuck the tennis pro or get drunk or go shopping with their girlfriends,
or
right?
all three.
Yeah.
And
Just schedule management.
Right.
at the same time feel like because they're so privileged, they must be smart, right?
Mhm.
But they're standing there and they see Caitlyn Jenner, and one of them is saying, I can always tell trans people. I can always tell them. They always look like guys in dresses to me, right? And I'm laughing because they've looked right at me and even talked to me before, smile, friendly, everything was nice. They don't know that I'm trans.
No,
And then what made it even better was they turned around, paid for their coffee, and thanked the transgender girl who was serving them.
that's
They also
amazing.
didn't know she was trans.
Amazing.
Yeah, but
Seriously.
for so many of us, it is an obvious factor. I know so many people, and honestly, yeah, no matter how hard they try, they're going to look like a linebacker in a dress, and there's no way around that because they had 50 years of testosterone poisoning before they started getting the right treatment.
Yeah.
And all of those changes, I mean, you guys both know when between the age of say 9 and 13, did you get taller?
Yeah, I got to my height that I am now, which is 5'9".
Yeah.
at the age of 10.
Right. Yeah.
And did your facial shape, for you, did your breasts come in and for
Oh
you
yeah.
start
Yeah.
getting muscular and more hair on your face and that
Not
kind
super
of
muscular, and that hasn't changed. But yes, I see where you're going with this. But yeah.
you started to get the facial hair and all of that, right?
Yeah.
All at that time. And that's the age where they are trying to apply this for kids, so that in the future, you can't tell. You don't have people my age or near my age who've gone through all of this because they were allowed to naturally become who they are. You know, ideally though, I mean, that's still catering to a binary idea of gender. And that's
Right.
what that I know for a fact that that's not right. You know,
Right.
there are a lot of variations in science. They're always talking about theory, and some people, when they want to, they misuse the word and they make it sound like a theory is just something hypothetical. Well, it is, until it receives such a preponderance of evidence that the general scientific community says, yeah, this is the best explanation we have for this, whether it's evolution or any of those things. And in physics, they're still looking for the universe creation, the one be-all theory that come, but they have to keep writing them off, because every time somebody comes up with a good one, they find there are things that have been left out, things that are not accounted for, things that don't fit. Transgender people are real, and we've been around forever, and we don't fit the binary model. Therefore, the binary theory of gender cannot be right. The only way you can make it right is to try to force square pegs into round holes.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
bullshit, you know?
I was wondering, since you have transitioned and sort of found your true self and you found your voice, for lack of a better term, is there, because I know of people who are trans who have zero desire to be an advocate. They just want to live their life and do their thing,
Yeah,
and not.
that's fine. And you know what? I often liken the struggle for transgender rights to some kind of war. You know, there's an enemy out there that doesn't want us to have what we need.
Certainly.
But in every war, there are people who are, there are people who are generals, and there are people who are out there in the trenches, and there are people who are getting killed, and there are other people who are at home working in a factory to create guns or uniforms or something else, or they are just living the lifestyle you are trying to protect so that it remains real. And so, not every trans person is like that. And honestly, there's a lot of diversity in the trans, just like there is in any group of human beings.
You don't say. So, like, I think what you're saying is that trans people are like everyone else.
Isn't it funny?
Imagine that.
Wow, I can't believe
What?
that.
What a concept,
Wow,
right?
yeah.
Crazy.
I wonder, the thing I always feel like with those folks who decide they don't, like you said, they don't want to be generals, they don't want to be on the front lines, that it's also a little bit of a hearts and minds side of things to your Starbucks story.
They say if you want to change the world, you start by changing the person standing next to you, right? That's how
Yeah.
and those people who are just living their lives, they're doing that one at a time with each person that they meet, because it's been proven that once somebody knows somebody who is queer, gay, trans, whatever,
Non-binary, yeah.
their feelings change about the whole concept. When you don't know any trans people in your life, I think that's where the whole cultural divide comes from in this country. It's not, I mean, this whole blue-red thing, I think it's between urban and rural. And it's because in urban communities where people tend to be voting blue, they tend to be more open-minded because they're exposed to so many people of different kinds. In rural communities, many of those people out in those small towns, they are only exposed to people that they know who are just like them. They don't know a gay person, they don't know a trans person, they don't know any of these things.
Or they think they don't know any of those people. They just,
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
They may,
Didn't
they may
realize
like the
Yeah.
carrots, Starbucks. Yeah, they may know them, but not know them. That's true. But even so, they don't think they do, and so they don't have any reason to humanize people who are that way. They just become an object, and it's easy to hate an object. It's not
Yeah.
easy to hate another person.
True.
Anyway, what else you want?
Oh my gosh, we talk about this all, talk about all of this all
Yeah.
day. I love
Oh,
it.
about being an advocate. I didn't actually set out to be an advocate.
Hmm.
It's just I came out and I was very fortunate because Michigan, Southeast Michigan, has a very strong and supportive trans community. And it's because we've had resources here for many years that are not present in so many other places. Well, I mean, for crying out loud, most people in most towns in this country, trans people barely have even a gay bar to go to as a safe space. Barely
Hmm.
at that. And they're not even always welcome in those because a lot of gay guys don't want anything to do with transgender women. Why would they? They're attracted to men, right?
Right. Yeah.
So, but Detroit not only had a plethora of LGBT friendly queer bars, we have Ferndale, and the people in Ferndale are incredibly trans friendly. And part of that is due to the influence of my adopted goddaughter, Julia Music, who is this queer woman who is the organizer of Ferndale Pride. And I met her years ago, years and years ago. And she's a doll. She really is. She's my other daughter, my daughter from another mother, right? And
I
whatever.
love it.
Anyway, Julia my organization was new. We'd only been around for about a year. And we were going to set up a booth at Ferndale Pride. And I contacted her and I said, we're getting our nonprofit status, but we don't have it yet. So can we get nonprofit? And she said, hang on, I want to call you. Well, I had just a day or two before, I'd been to a meeting for like volunteers for Ferndale Pride. I just went in there. Turned out I couldn't do it because I was so busy with my own booth, but I saw Julia for the first time. And when I saw her, she had like this, one side of her head was all sheared. She had almost a mohawk hanging over the other side. She looked very Ferndale dykish, but at the same time, just gorgeous. She's a gorgeous woman in her early 30s. And so she said, hang on, I want to call you because I want to know what's going on with who you are and stuff. As soon as she called and we started talking and I told her about what I was doing, she said, oh yeah, Detroit Invasions. Right. I know exactly who you are. I know exactly who you are. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. You guys are nonprofit. We'll give you that. No worries. And you know what? You and I are going to be great friends.
Love it.
And I said, why do you say that? She said, we're both event promoters.
I love it. Exactly.
I started doing these things not as any kind of statement, but because when I first came out, I loved nothing better than to go out to nightclubs and dance and drink and just have fun, to get dolled up and go out and drink and dance. And I had invited a couple of friends. In the first year that I was out, most people, when they transition, they tiptoe out the door a little at a time, dressed, and they maybe go a few places, or they dress a lot at home or whatever. For years and years and years, the only time I got to be me was after I was working and I'd go on business trips. If I was staying out of town for a couple of weeks, there would be some time in a hotel room where I would get to be me. But those trips were getting less and less as I got older, and I had fewer and fewer opportunities, and things were not working out right in my marriage. And I knew it was all because of what I was holding inside of me. And I decided to transition before anybody in the world knew I was trans. And I went online and did the homework I needed to do, and I started self-medicating with hormones 3.5 years before anybody in the world knew I was trans. So by the time I actually told my ex and started going out, my body was filled with hormones. I already had small breasts. There was no hair left on my body. Somehow my ex didn't even realize, but it was like a 2x4 between the eyes for her, but we're still friends. It worked out okay. But my point is that when I finally did start going out, I was like a racehorse in the gate, waiting for the gate to open. I was off and running. There was no gradual tiptoeing about it for me. And so that first year, I went to a lot of organization events around the country, other events, Atlanta and Vegas and Pennsylvania, and another one in Erie, PA. And the one in Erie, PA was towards the end of my first year out. And I invited a couple of girls to from the Erie thing to come up and see the places we had here, meet the girls that go to Adam's Apple or Gigi's or whatever. So they were coming in, and right before that, it was Christmas. And at the time I was still living with my ex, I was still part-time. For me, getting to go out was like a special occasion. I'd get a hotel room and I'd be gone for a couple of days. And over Christmas, and this is the way it is for a lot of the girls who are part-time. Over the holidays, they've got obligations to family and other people who don't know that they're trans. They're closeted, right? And so nobody was around. And my birthday is December 28th, which is the middle of the week between Christmas and New Year's. Everybody was tied up with family, and I couldn't find anybody to go out with, right? Well, about a week and a half later, remember this is January in Detroit now, week and a half later, these two girls say they're coming in, so I kind of put the word out, let's give them a welcome at the Adam's Apple on Saturday night, right? But then at the last minute, they decided to come in early on a Friday, and 2 or 3 other girls came with them. So there were about 5 girls from out of town. And I suddenly had something to do. And what am I going to do with them on Friday? So we went down to Ferndale, and we sat in Soho, and it wasn't snowing, but it was kind of like that cold, drizzly kind of rain in Detroit. And there was hardly anybody there. There were 9 of us there. And we got through the night. It was fun. Everybody had a good time. The next night, I was running late getting to the Adam's Apple where everybody was supposed to be. And I pull up and my girlfriend says, wait, I got to come out. She comes outside, sits in the car, and she's making bullshit conversation with me for a second. I didn't know what was going on. But then she looked at her phone. She says, okay, come on, let's go. We walked in the door, and there's normally maybe 30 people in that bar. It's just a little neighborhood bar. I don't know, you've probably never been. There were 125 people in there. And they had a birthday cake for me.
That's awesome. I love it.
We had such a good time that we said, fucking hell, we should do this again. Well, a few days before that, on one of the bulletin boards, one local girl had said, what's this I hear about Saturday night, about some kind of T-girl invasion of the D? And so when everybody at that Saturday night was saying, we got to do this again, this idea formulated in my head about creating an event here in town, similar to what I'd seen in other cities. And I thought, well, Detroit Invasion, what a great name.
Love it.
So that's what we started calling it.
So how long has the organization been going for now?
Well, that was January of 2015, and I consider that the first invasion.
Yeah, certainly.
I retired last summer. I'd had enough. In the beginning, I was doing 4 3-day events every year.
Wow.
And promoting them through social media, handling everything. We rented party buses for the girls to travel on. We'd take them to the MGM Grand. We'd take them on the Detroit Princess River Cruise, and various other places, Ferndale, all these different places. Everybody always had a great time. We'd get anywhere between 50 and 150 girls. That would turn up for 3 days in Detroit. But it was a lot of pressure. It was a lot of work. And by I think it was about a year and a half, it was towards the end of 2016. So around the beginning of 2017, we officially became a nonprofit. So that was after 2 years. And we ran that. I had a board. But there's one thing about being in theater. I had been in so many regional theaters, major ones, the Alley Theater, the Kansas City Rep, St. Louis Rep, Meadowbrook. I worked at all these regional theaters around here, around the country. And I had seen so many times where some person who just loved theater would fucking they'd start a theater in a garage, barn or whatever, and build it, and it would become a local institution and famous, and they would start doing really great theater, and then before long the city would want to institutionalize them and would build them a great big theater. And as soon as they did that, a new board would come in and they would fire the original artistic director and bring in somebody from New York. Happened all the time, right? When I set up my organization, I cheated. I wrote the bylaws so that I could never be voted out of office and I could never be overruled.
That's perfect.
That's
In other words, anybody that came on board knew, yeah, you want to help, you're welcome to help, but this is my ball game. We're doing it my way. I'm the boss, right? They knew that. And some people couldn't handle it and they left after a while. And some of them became critics and enemies, you know, because my boyfriend, Max, he says it's the tall poppy syndrome. He says the minute that one poppy comes up, somebody wants to chop it off.
Uh-huh.
mm.
It's
And it
true.
rises above the rest of them. But it was
So
a
it
lot.
must.
It was a
Sorry.
lot of stress. And also during COVID, I retired from my day job, the job I had that Mark and I worked at. And Max wanted me to be free to travel more because he lives in Australia. And so when he's over, we spend 3 months over there when it's summer over there, and he spends 3 months over here when it's summer here. Spring and fall, we're in our own homes. But
That's
um,
brilliant.
but do that. I can't be tied down to a job, and I'm 70 years old. I deserve to be retired, right?
Yes.
Mhm.
And have some fun.
That's what I'm
More
trying.
fun. Have fun
That's
instead of making fun for everyone else.
Well, I did that. I did 23 major events plus 3 major political rallies. I
Whew.
did Zoom meetings up the wazoo for 2 or 3 years during COVID. I did a lot, and there were also minor things, fundraisers and other little things along the way. And my vice president, Dina, when I retired, she said, "Fuck this, I'm retiring too." Because she didn't want to do it with anybody else. She didn't want to run the thing. She was perfect for me because she knew I was the boss. She would throw ideas at me all the time and I would shoot down most of them. But we got along great. She had skills I didn't have, and I had qualities she didn't have, and that she retired too. The board is continuing. They're not as ambitious as we were, and they are learning how to handle the details so that they look a little bit less amateurish.
Mm.
But they're continuing. I believe it will continue, but it's what I was trying to do was actually eventually build a major national convention, transgender convention here in Detroit. And we got very close to it. The event that my last event was about as close to that as you can get. I mean, we had the Dearborn Inn, we had 4 days, we had a swimming pool outside, we had all these great events, we had almost 200 people sign up, and we had a big gala banquet on Saturday night at the Dearborn Inn. It was fabulous.
Beautiful.
We
Yeah.
had workshops during the day with doctors and cosmetic surgeons and lawyers and all these other people in there. It was cool, but you get tired after a while.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
certainly.
I get that.
I want to be cognizant of your time as well as I heard our front door close. So I think the monsters have returned. But I don't know if it's a optimistic way to wrap things up, but are you optimistic about the I don't want to say plight, but the future of people living their true expression and being their true selves?
Do I think that Ron DeSantis and people of his ilk are going to succeed in pushing us back into the closet? Is that
That's another way to phrase it. Sure, let's take it that way.
No,
Mike DeWine, whomever, it doesn't matter.
I think that this country has gone through a lot of things in its history, and we've always survived. We've always survived, and we've always, as that Martin Luther King quote, that the arc of history is long, but it bends towards progress.
Mhm.
We may get some setbacks. We're already in worse shape now than we were, say, 3 or 4 years ago. 3 or 4 years ago, it was the best I've ever seen it for trans people, because the right wing had not yet caught up. But the right wing, the moment marriage equality came about and the country settled down and said, oh, okay, well, gay people are here. What the fuck? The moment that happened, and they could no longer use the queer threat to beat their supporters to get them to the polls to vote for them so that they could then control the finances of the country. It was the same way with abortion. You take away gay rights and you take away abortion, those same people may still hate, but they're no longer driven to the polls in the same way. So the right had to create a new boogeyman. And that was me.
Ta-da!
They think we're coming for their children or something. Well, I guess we are in a way, but not the way they think.
Right.
Right.
I
Yeah.
mean, if grooming actually worked, would I look like this? I was groomed to be a cisgender man.
Right.
Weird. When I look like this, it doesn't work. And you think about that. People who are cis don't realize it, but every time I hear somebody say, "Oh, those fucking LGBT people, if they just wouldn't rub it in our face."
Oh, jeez.
Well, think about it from the other side. Every day I walk around, I see straight people, cis people holding hands, kissing, stories about them, and this is all normal. We're rubbing it in their face because we're not normal, right?
Ridiculous.
See the hypocrisy in that?
Oh,
I-
there's so much.
I think more and more people are, honestly, when I travel, and I travel a lot, I try to avoid certain places. I don't really want to go to Florida right now, but
Yeah. Disney
Yeah,
World's off
nobody
the
really
list, but
does,
yeah.
unfortunately.
Florida, Tennessee, Kentucky, Texas, those states are kind of on my do not fly list, right?
Hmm.
But even so, I would go there, and when I walk around, I'm never afraid of anybody. I know exactly who I am, and I have as much right to live my life as anybody else, and I do. And you know, it's nobody ever looks at me funny or confronts me. Now, granted, I'm privileged in the sense that I have a degree of what they call passability. You know, even though
Mhm.
I don't think most people care enough to look at me carefully enough to realize that I'm trans. I think they just, unless they get into a conversation with me and stuff, maybe they know, but nobody treats me badly. Maybe they just, maybe trans, but she's pretty. I don't know. Maybe that's it.
Pretty
I-
counts no matter what.
I will tell you why I think that the future is hopeful. Many, many years ago, when I lived up in Bloomfield, we had a neighborhood association, and it was more than the normal thing because for those 200 homes, we provided the water from 2 community wells. Well, every fall and every spring, we had to have a night where all the board members got in their cars and went around the neighborhood and flushed all the fire hydrants, right?
Mhm.
And that's kind of like, drinking beer and telling jokes.
Right.
And long before anybody knew I was trans. And we're out there one night. Now, when I was an actor, I was considered a good-looking leading man, right? I was never a football player. I couldn't earn a man card from sports. I couldn't earn a man card from working on cars or any of those things. I was certainly not a bully, but I got by on my man card because other guys respected the fact that I was always with good-looking women.
Yeah.
I always had pretty girlfriends. Right?
Uh-huh.
And so we're out there and they're telling jokes, and somebody tells a joke about drag queens or trans people or whatever, and everybody laughs. And I was kind of a little off in the shadows, smoking a cigarette, drinking a beer, not really saying anything. And a couple of other guys came in and they said things and stuff like that. And then there was a bit of a pause, and then out of that silence, I said, I don't know. I've been to Vegas. I've seen some of those girls. They were so fucking pretty. I'd be tempted. All of a sudden, these guys went, fuck yeah, you're right. I saw one. It was a me. Fuck yeah. Like, oh God, this is it. This is it. And I don't know if you know this or not, but one of the most popular genres of pornography involves transgender women.
Oh, yeah. Of course. Yeah, absolutely.
There's a documentary. I should, if I can find it, I'll send you a link to it. But it was a group of anthropologists, archaeologists, sociologists, psychologists that all got together to create a study. And the study, they called it, "What Does Edward from Twilight Have in Common with Shemale Porn?"
Amazing. That's
And
amazing.
how
Yes,
funny
please send
they
it
went
to us.
back, they looked at baboon culture and orangutan culture, and they looked at all of these different things, and they isolated what it is in female psychology that where female psychology finds a man attractive. The factors that are mostly the factors that appeal to women in their kind of secret perfect guy.
Mhm.
These were very powerful, very smart, very strong, very masculine, and at the same time with this flaw, this broken part inside
Of course.
that only the girl can fix, and the
Mhm.
guy only has eyes for that one girl. Nobody. This is like the fantasy. Am I right?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Well, Edward in Twilight, right? He's immortal.
Mhm.
He's a fucking
Right,
vampire. He can kill anyone.
right.
And
Doesn't
he
get any better
only
than
wants-
that.
He only wants that girl, and in the meantime, he's got this broken heart thing inside. And, yeah,
And he
then-
glitters.
and of course, they went straight to orangutans.
Of course.
They watched these baboons and orangutans walking around, and they all have huge junk hanging off the back, right? And then it gets into this whole thing about the nature of procreation and how they're all, for evolutionary, they're trying to make sure that that fertile female carries their sperm to term and not the other three guys that are going to try to fuck her.
Mhm.
So they are checking out the competition to see how big their dicks are.
Yeah.
They're checking them out, and somehow in this is what the psychologists and all those psychiatrists in this documentary, I'll send it to you, it's great. This is what they hypothesize, is that somehow on certain aspects of the male psychology, there's an imprint that combines a beautiful woman with the image of the other orangutan's dicks, and it creates a dichotomy and a frism that somehow is exciting. So the men who look at transgender porn are not gay. They're attracted to women.
Makes sense.
Something in this picture of a beautiful woman with a penis that clicks all their buttons.
Yeah.
And it is one of the most popular genres of porn on the entire internet. It's everywhere from anime all the way through. And so my feeling is that if every person in this world who was trans, even just to a little bit, suddenly came out tomorrow and said, I'm trans, that's me. And every guy who was attracted to transgender women but didn't want to admit it for being accused of being gay, if every one of them, and believe me, there are a shitload of them. I hear from them. I get messages from them every fucking day.
Oh, I'm sure.
There are millions of them. And you'd be amazed how many are Islamic too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if everybody just was suddenly honest, the world would change overnight. It would flip like an iceberg. But it is
You're right.
already flipping. And I think that what you're seeing in this, a lot of the people on the right who are against us are so hypocritical. They don't really give a shit. It's like Donald Trump. I don't think Donald Trump gives a shit one way or another about trans
I
women.
agree.
Knowing his history, he's probably been to bed with a trans woman or two just to find out what it was like.
Sure.
What he cared about was making a deal, and he'll throw anybody under the bus for it.
Hmm.
People he just doesn't care about, like me, right?
Hmm.
There are people out there who really do hate us because they're, religion. But I think that they're in a minority. I think they're shrinking. I really do.
Good.
More and more people are moving to cities. And what we said before about the difference between urban and rural, rural communities are drying up in many places.
True.
And, I'm hopeful. A really
Good.
long answer to a
No,
simple.
but it's
No,
good.
it's
No,
very
it's
good.
it's very good. No, that's perfect.
For more information on TG Detroit, check out their website, tgdetroit.com.
Why the Podcast is produced by the Professional Production Company. Please be sure to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts because we're shallow and need constant validation. For more information, you can check out our website, whythepodcast.com. And like everyone else, we're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Today's show was recorded and produced by Heidi Hedquist and myself from our world headquarters located on the second floor of the professional office building, centrally located downtown. Our reluctant executive producers are John Sauvé and Sandy Stone. Our willing producers are Rachel Allen and Randy Jeanette. Our intern is Zach Jackson. This one's for Philippe. Thanks for joining us. Newsflash, we're coming home.
Nigel, is that you? Are you here, Nigel?